Why, hello there. This is Sister Service, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the prodigal son. Later on this week, we're going to invite Vicki Lee to come in and talk with us a little bit more about some of the great upcoming lessons for the Come Follow Me program. And I can't wait to hear from her. But today we're going to talk briefly about the prodigal son and what that means. So I'm going to scoot myself over. And when you think of the story of the prodigal son, you're just going to think about the scriptures where Jesus is trying to explain the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin, and how we rejoice over things that are lost that come back. It's interesting that there's actually two people that we can relate to in the prodigal son. Now, we can relate to the son who left, or the one that stayed behind, and actually most people can relate to both. And so when you look at this picture, I love it because, he's hugging his son who's returning. If you're not familiar with the prodigal son, it's basically this. A father has two sons. One of the sons comes to him and says, "I'd like all of my inheritance right now." And so the father puts together all of that money and he gives it to his son. And his son goes off into the city and he spends it on riotous living. Even the older brother later says that he had spent it with harlots. And so he just did all of the riotous living he could. Well, eventually the money ran out, and then there began a famine in that land. And he ended up being so poor that he had to work for someone. And he was with the pigs, feeding the pigs. And it said he would fain eat the husks that were fed to the pigs. He was so hungry. And it's interesting to note that because in their culture, especially with the Old Testament, pigs were so unclean. It was something so disgusting. So it's kind of some wonderful imagery for people when Christ was telling the story. Well, eventually he says, "You know what, I know that the servants in my father's house eat much better than this. And if I can just go back to my father and say I'll be a servant, maybe he'll take me back." And so as he's coming home, his father sees him a far way off, and he runs out to him and he kisses him on the neck, and he gives him a robe and gives him a ring, and decides to kill the fatted calf. And so they come home to this big celebration, and the older brother, the good brother, he comes in and he sees the party, and it's upsetting to him. I have some great stuff from Elder Holland on that I want to share with you. And basically, each of us are that boy, I think, in many ways. If I can get it to play.
Son is not so much angry that the other has come home as he is angry that his parents are so happy about it. Feeling unappreciated and perhaps more than a little self-pity, this dutiful son, and he is wonderfully dutiful, forgets for a moment that he has never had to know filth or despair, fear or self-loathing. He forgets for a moment that every calf on the ranch is already his, and so are all the robes in the closet and every ring in the drawer. He forgets for a moment that his faithfulness has and always will be rewarded. No, he who has virtually everything, and who has in his hard-working, wonderful way earned it, lacks the one thing that might make him the complete man of the Lord he nearly is. He has yet to come to the compassion and mercy, the charitable breadth of vision, to see that this is not a rival returning.
I want to stop it right there and just clarify too. I don't think that anybody really in the gospel could relate on, oh, someone has now come back to the ward, and now I'm jealous or upset. I don't think that really happens. But where it can happen is where when someone, anyone at all, has something or gets something that maybe you feel like you have been so faithful you deserve. So let's talk about maybe a calling. Maybe somebody who just came off the streets is now, come back to the gospel, and now they've made that person your bishop. And you thought, I've been waiting to be bishop my whole life, or I always thought that I would eventually be called as bishop. Why is this person being called? Or maybe someone who just turned 18, and you've always wanted to be a young women's camp director, and this girl, she just turned 8, she's just barely an adult, and now they're going to make her, a camp director, even though she was just a young woman yesterday. So in some ways, maybe like you don't feel like, you feel like you might be more qualified for a position. Also, let's say you have infertility issues and someone else is coming in with their brand new baby, having only been married a year. And you've struggled with it for years. Whatever it is where someone is coming into the gospel and it seems like everything's being given to them, and maybe not as much you. Maybe you've been a member your whole life and your husband just won't commit. Yet another person's coming in off the street and her husband, and she struggles with it for, a month, and then he finally commits and comes, whatever it is that makes it so that there's this unequal ground where you feel like you've done way more and deserve more. Maybe someone who was awful to their kids and their kids all turned out great, and you were really good to your kids and they turned out awful. Whatever the inequality is, it's worth to note that either side we could be sitting on it in the parable of the prodigal son.
It is his brother. As his father pled with him to see, it is one who was dead and now is alive. It is one who was lost and now is found. Certainly this younger brother had been a prisoner of sin, stupidity, and a pigsty. But the older brother lives in some confinement too. He has as yet been unable to break out of the prison of himself. He is haunted by the green-eyed monster of jealousy. He feels taken for granted by his father and disenfranchised by his brother, when neither is the case. He has fallen victim to a fictional affront. As such, he is like Tantalus of Greek mythology. He is up to his chin in water, but he remains thirsty nevertheless. One who has heretofore presumably been very happy with his life and content with his good fortune, suddenly feels very unhappy simply because another has had some good fortune as well.
And I'll stop the video right there. There is so much in that little section. Like, where do I start? When he's talking about where our heart comes into that. Think about the two brothers. Which one is more grateful for the home? Which one is more grateful for the meal? We have so much given to us, and are we grateful for it all? And if we can't see what we already have, but we're caught up in what we don't have, we're caught up in why maybe things aren't fair, maybe why we have, foot down and someone else has a leg up that maybe they don't deserve. You have to realize that what matters most is there for you, and to recognize your connection to Heavenly Father. It doesn't matter what you have or don't have, what other people have that you don't. It's also important to note that we need to be happy for other people when good things happen to them. Maybe I'm struggling with infertility, but when you have a baby, I should be happy for you. And maybe you're complaining about your children and I don't have any children, but I should be patient with you. there are moments in life where things aren't on equal ground. I mean, many of you guys have a spleen. I don't have a spleen. Or, you know, there are so many things where we are on unequal ground, and how you deal with that helps. Is almost like how you deal with it is part of your character. It's who you are, and if you're dealing with things in a negative way, then that obviously is not going to be a building of your character. If you want your character to build, you need to be happy for other people when things work out for them and they haven't worked out for you. Happy for other people when they get things that you don't have. There will always be inequality. There will always be moments where you have worked harder and you are seemingly getting less. But you have to remember that in the end, we're all getting resurrection. We're all getting a piece of Jesus Christ, and we're a piece of his kingdom. And if we're faithful, we will have all that he has, not just a part or a portion, all of it. And both sons have worked for that. One son that stayed there and he did everything he was supposed to do, he earned that. He worked for it, and now he has everything. The son that had to go and do everything the wrong way eventually came to know and to value what was there at the home too, and he came home as well. Whether or not they receive the same, I think that they will, just because there is inheritance that is never ending in our Heavenly Father's kingdom. And it's everything. It's not just a part. The only advantage is that maybe one of them might have more knowledge than the other, but it's not very clear which one, because both have earned knowledge over a lifetime, just going about things in a different way. When we arrive at the same place, though, our Heavenly Father rejoices for both. So I just wanted to add a little clarity to the prodigal son. There's so many more levels, and if you have a better idea, please leave me a comment in the feed, and thanks for listening.